So one that we've definitely got to talk about, Jet, from the weekend is the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Nick Blackwell fight. I've already done a video on it. Got my arse handed to me in the comments section. But I was keen to hear your thoughts, like how you saw that fight and what you made of it all, really.
Yeah, I never got around to doing a video because I've been crazy busy the last end of the week. So, yeah, I watched the fight. I watched the main highlights of it because I was actually at work. But, yeah, I mean, Chris Eubank Jr. for me dominantly won the fight. I'd say one round probably he lost, and that's probably because he was just taking it off. But the other rounds, comfortable for him, came forward, showed his flashy skills, combinations, and, done what he normally does. And it's similar to the Spike fight, more or less, but this was slightly more competitive for me, even though Eubank was actually winning the rounds. The thing is, for me, it's tough because I know he was actually Danny Jacobs' mandatory for the regular WBA title. But for me, going down to win the British title, I know his dad never won it and it was more for legacy and that sort of stuff. But for me, at this stage in his career, he's 26, 27, I think it is.
Yeah.
And for me, him going down to British level and not winning the Lonsdale belt outright, it's kind of pointless for me. Don't get me wrong, British title is a fantastic title. Probably never get to British level. I wouldn't even get to English level. But yeah, it's pointless. I mean, at this stage in his career, he's got a great following. He's got a lot of charisma. He's got his dad supporting him. I know he's burnt all his bridges with the main UK promoters, but he's on a good roll. People know who he is. You say Eubank, and people go, "Oh no, I know who he is." And yeah, for me, at British level, he doesn't need to be there. The problem is with me, from what Billy Joe was actually saying, it was totally true. He was saying, I fought Nick Blackwell 2-3 years ago and I beat him 12-0 on the scorecards, whereas you're fighting him 2-3 years after me and I beat you in between as well. And he's fighting for a British title, not a world title, which was actually mandatory for. And that kind of sets the tone, and it has a realistic outlook on Chris Eubank Jr.'s career thus far. Where he goes from here now is actually the bigger question for me. Does he go onto European level, a title that Billy Joe's already won? Does he step up against a world level opponent and go for an international title route, something like that? Or does he go in straight against the top of the division, Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo, Golovkin, those sort of people, even Andy Lee, depending on if he's still with Adam Booth or not? Where does he go from here? It's very tough. What do you think? What do you make of the... I know what you make of the fight, but what do you make of where he goes from here now?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, I don't think it was bad for him to necessarily drop to British level, because I think that the reason he got beaten in the first Billy Joe Saunders fight was because the real lack of learning fights and the lack of opposition he'd faced at that point. And I think that the fights against Chudinov, Spike, Blackwell... they've really put him in a position where he's now in a great spot to attack world level. And I've got to say that he conclusively proved that he is above British level in those performances. He's a real handful, Eubank. He really is a good fighter, certainly at this level. In terms of where he needs to go, a lot of people, I had some comments the other day about him fighting Golovkin or him fighting Jacobs, him fighting Andy Lee. I think it's even a waste of time to discuss those fights. For me, the only fight out there for Chris Eubank Jr. of any note is Billy Joe Saunders. Like, a fighter in England at present is all about being on pay-per-view. And Billy Joe Saunders is the only middleweight opponent that will deliver Chris Eubank Jr. substantial pay-per-view and the associated revenue. And that fight just got 10 times bigger last weekend due to what happened with Billy Joe at ringside and, the hype that's now surrounding Chris Eubank Jr. and Senior, by the way. I think he's got to fight Billy Joe Saunders again. Billy Joe Saunders is probably the most winnable fight out there for him. It's not a fight that I think he'll win, but I would say it is the most winnable of the world title fights. It's probably the most money It's certainly the most celebrity and the most publicity. And the great thing for Eubank Jr. is if he does lose to Billy Joe Saunders, which I suspect that he may do, he's got a ready-made get-out, which is that he can re-sign with Eddie Hearn, move up to £168, which is probably more a natural fit for him anyway. And then at £168, he can join the matchroom mix of Martin Murray, Callum Smith, Rocky Fielding, Paul Smith, James DeGale. I've always thought that James DeGale Eubank Jr. fight has the potential to be a monstrous pay-per-view fight one day. But even George Groves, even Callum Smith, those are all huge, huge fights for my money.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with pretty much everything you said. Just the only thing I do question is why he dropped down to British level, but maybe he needed the experience more than anything. That's the only thing that I can look at it.
I think he's very inexperienced as a fighter still. I mean, after the Saunders loss, the best opponent he'd beaten was probably still Bradley Price. I think he needed to get them solid mid to upper mid tier wins.
I agree with that, definitely. If it's good for experience and it's good for him, then, if he's going to improve, then why not? The Billy Joe Saunders fight, I mean, it's hard because I know Frank keeps saying we don't want to work with Eubank Senior, he's a headache and this, that and the other. He can go face Golovkin or whoever else holds the title. But for me, I mean, that's the only realistic fight out there. I mean, even if he faces Golovkin, he'll lose in 6 to 8 rounds, I'd say. Even though he's got a good chin, Golovkin will eventually catch up with him. Yeah. We saw what Golovkin done with Lemieux. I mean, Lemieux, if he's going down an international route and he's trying to get big fights at middleweight, Lemieux would be a good fight, possibly, if Lemieux could still make middleweight. And then that could be like a final eliminator for Billy Joe's title or something on those lines. But those sort of people are going to stand him in good stead, and if he can do a demolition job on those sort of opponents, the Lemieux, the Hassan and Dams, Austin Trout, possibly those sort of opponents. If he could do a demolition job on them, then I'd have a bit more confidence that he could beat Billy Joe Saunders. But for me, Saunders, too slick, too smart, southpaw stance, everything that you could do. He's got respectable power as well. People forget he knocked down Andy Lee hard, very hard. For me, he said he got caught by the right hook, Andy Lee, and he felt it. And Billy Joe stood off him, took his time, went back to his boxing. Very smart. He knows what he's doing in there. And the only concern about him is his stamina. But in recent times, because he's holding a world title, I think he's been more motivated. He's keeping down his weight. For me, even Saunders can make 154. I reckon Saunders can make 154 with the right diet and the right nutrition. But, at 160, he looks good. And but I know Bursak's not a great opponent. Someone made a good point, actually, on YouTube comments that I was viewing the other day on IFL, I think. And they said, why is Billy Joe Saunders facing Max Bursak, someone that Nick Blackwell has actually faced 2 years ago or so, and he pretty much beat, but he got robbed on the scorecards, and he was complaining about Eubank dropping down to British level and facing Nick Blackwell. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually listened to Ultratech Sports video yesterday, and he made a very good point on that precise issue, which is he said, don't worry about the Max Bursak issue. The Max Bursak issue is literally a prep fight for the big summer Eubank matchup. All of this posturing about Frank Warren not wanting to work with Eubank. Frank Warren needs the Eubank fight more than anyone. He's looking to launch a pay-per-view channel. And how is he going to launch pay-per-view at present? I mean, there's only one fight that he can make that would launch pay-per-view for him. And if he tries to do it with Terry Flanagan or Liam Smith, he might get humiliated. He might do a pay-per-view that sells 10,000 buys. Billy Joe Saunders, Chris Eubank Jr. might do 500,000 pay-per-view buys, maybe more than that. It would be a massive, massive, massive event. So Frank Warren needs that fight just as much as anyone, and he will be there when the fight is to get made. And Ultratech Sport thinks that fight has already been agreed in principle, and maybe that's even why Billy Joe was ringside last night, to start the build there, to start the hype. I mean, don't forget, Mick Hennessy is maybe doing a bit more with Frank Warren himself now. Maybe he, with the Huey Fury stuff, maybe they've had some conversations about getting Billy Joe at the fight ringside. So, it's an interesting one. But from Chris Eubank Jr.'s perspective, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying about Kell Brook earlier. How on earth is he going to get someone like David Lemieux to come over to England? I mean, Chris Eubank Jr. doesn't have a promoter. He's not a pay-per-view fighter standalone. And a guy like Hassan and Dam, you could bring him over, but nobody's going to buy a ticket to see Hassan and Dam. And Hassan and Dam is actually quite good. And that sort of slick, moving, technical style could cause real issues for Eubank. Hassan and Dam's not just going to stand there, and let Eubank set his feet on him. So I think it's all posturing. I really do. I don't see Eubank having any option except Billy Joe Saunders, because there's just nowhere else for him to go, for my money. How is he going to bring it? He could travel and be the away fighter on a Danny Jacobs fight and hope that Box Nation show it at 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Or he could fight Billy Joe and get paid 10 times as much money and become a superstar off the back of it if he wins.
The good thing is as well, he gets paid off it. He gets paid off it if he beats or even loses potentially to Billy Joe Saunders. He's not gonna, not get a payday. He's gonna get a massive payday, massive following off it, and then ready-made. Even if he doesn't have promoter, and he's working with Al Heyman. Al Heyman works closely with Eddie Hearn. He can get a big fight with James DeGale, who's also with Al Heyman and Eddie. And then, there's plenty of, as you said, Martin Murray, Callum Smith, Rocky Fielding, George Groves. There's so many potential fights out there. He could go down a WBA route. He could go down, the potential Arthur Abraham Ramirez winner. There's so many options there for someone like Eubank. I think just he needs that Billy Joe Saunders rematch more than anything, really. For me, that's the key to him unlocking a lot more doors than he has at the moment. It's the same with Brook. Brook needs the Khan fight more than Khan needs him. Eubank needs Saunders more than Saunders needs. Well, in this case, I wouldn't say so much. Actually, they need each other equally as much.
They both need each other. Yeah, they really do. Yeah, it's like if Eubank goes and beats Saunders, I mean, James DeGale is looking for an opponent actively. I know he's hoping to get the Badu Jack fight, but let's see if that actually happens. George Groves is looking for an opponent. Does he really want to face Martin Murray? I'd like to see Eubank throwing his name into this mix. There are some mega fights. I'd like to see Eubank calling out Carl Frotz if he's able to tie it up with DeGale or Groves. He is a serious draw and a serious entertainer, and he's a very good fighter, Eubank. Don't get me wrong when I question some of his defence. He's a very good fighter, very good entertainer, and he's a big draw. And if he's handled correctly, he can make a hell of a lot of money in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think even Eddie Hearn knows that he's got a massive following. He has a big name. He draws crowds. I mean, he put him on against Jetta, was it? I think it was when he pulled out. He still brought in most of the crowd. Not many of the crowd actually pulled out, which is a sign of Eubank's pulling power. And also the second part is when he left, he was he was pretty gutted at Eddie Hearn in a lot of interviews. He was like, I know Eubank Jr. wanted to work on with us and Sky and etc. And you could tell that Eddie Hearn actually knows his business and he knows that Eubank is a big name, and he was upset that he actually left. So I think we see it, and a lot of the promoters see it. Eubank Jr. has the potential to go right to the top in terms of finance and in terms of skill as well. Of course, defensive flaws remain, but he can work on them. He's 26, as we said, 27. Still got a bit of time to fix that. So yeah,
absolutely. I think if you take the heavyweights out of it, Joshua, Fury, Hay, Eubank is probably the biggest name in British boxing right now. I really do. Anyway, we'll wrap that one up for now, Jet. Thanks for watching, guys.